Overall, in Greece, as a new premier is sworn in after winning the vote, the left-wing anti-austerity Syriza party swiftly forms a coalition government, sparking fears that the country could be forced out of the Eurozone. After 4 months of intense fighting, a British-based Syrian NGO announces Kurdish forces have taken the city of Kobani out of the hands of the Islamic State. Over 3,500 flights canceled as the northeast United States braces for a massive winter storm set to hit from central New Jersey to the Canadian border.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the news today. Anti-austerity. Those were the words in air today as a new Prime Minister of Greece was sworn in less than 24 hours after the radical left-wing Syriza party took the election. 40-year-old party leader Alexis Tsipras became the youngest premier in the country in 150 years. Now the country is headed towards a face-off with the EU with a planned overhaul of Greece's massive 240 billion euro EU bailout. And added to all of it, neo-Nazi party Golden Dawn came in third place. We will go tonight to our analyst in Athens, but first, here's a look back.
Ο ελληνικός λαός μίλησε και όλοι σεβόμαστε την απόφασή του.
Η Ελλάδα αφήνει πίσω της τη λιτότητα της καταστροφής.
Il doit payer, ce sont les règles du jeu européen, il n'y a pas de place pour un comportement unilatéral en Europe.
Wir bieten Zusammenarbeit an, aber wir hoffen natürlich und gehen davon aus, dass Griechenland zu seinen eingegangenen Verpflichtungen steht.
And with me here in the studio to discuss this matter is Amir Oren, defense and government analyst for Haaretz daily newspaper. Good evening. Thank you very much.
Evening, Lucy.
And also Avi Primor, former Israeli ambassador to Germany. Ambassador Primor, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, too.
So, gentlemen, Alexis Tsipras said today that he wants to end the humiliation that his people passed through in the last few years. What is this humiliation that he's talking about when Greece wanted to be part of the EU?
Well, that's not the humiliation. The humiliation is the way they had to live in the last 5 years, but it's the humiliation they brought about themselves by cheating, by corruption, by running an economy that was ruinous for the country, but profitable for certain people, certain members of the higher society in Greece. And they wanted to bail out from the Europeans, and the Europeans posed their conditions, that's all. So they call this humiliation. But having said that, one shouldn't forget the people of Greece. They really suffered. They really suffered like no other nation in Europe, and you can understand that they have had enough of it.
How can they actually prevent in one way let's say, the domino effect that can happen if they will decide to break out of the EU?
There is indeed this danger of domino effect, and Ambassador Primor presented the rational analysis, which is, of course, accepted by Germany and other major European powers, while the Greek reaction was emotional, and it could be part and parcel of what we see in Europe against the EU, or at least the breakdown of nation states. You saw it in Scotland, you almost saw it in Catalonia regarding Spain, and here you may have something which has to do with a national spirit. You know, Greece is just a little bigger in population than Israel, 2 million more We are almost 8 million. They are almost 10 million. We are both Mediterranean countries. By the way, if they are kicked out of the Eurozone, we may accept them into the shekel zone. I'm not sure they would like it. But,
exactly.
An Italian admiral once said in an event I attended, when he raised his glass in a toast with his Israeli counterpart, he talked about our peoples, the peoples of the wine and oil, vis-a-vis Ambassador Primor's former hosts of beer and butter. There is the Southern European and Mediterranean spirit, mood,
yes.
As against the cold and calculating and rational German and Norwegian or Scandinavian in general and other countries, and they don't mesh together in today's Europe, especially when one country wants to rebel and then others, perhaps Spain, perhaps Italy, go along.
Yes, before I will take you to maybe how this mood is allowing the corruption and scandals that you talked about, because God knows that we know a lot about this here in Israel. Before we continue, here's Shai Ben Ari with more on the sweeping victory of the left.
The Greeks have spoken. Following 5 years of EU-dictated austerity measures grudgingly accepted by previous governments, voters in Sunday's election thrust the radical leftist Syriza party, headed by 40-year-old Alexis Tsipras, into power.
Greece is turning a page. Greece is leaving behind catastrophic austerity. It is leaving behind the fear and the autocracy. It is leaving behind 5 years of humiliation and pain.
With 149 seats in the new parliament, Syriza is just too short of an outright majority in the legislative body. On Monday, a coalition was quickly formed with the right-wing Independent Greeks Party. Under normal conditions, such a partnership would have been unlikely considering the vast differences between the two parties on social issues such as immigration. But their mutual opposition to austerity underlines the stated intentions of the new government. Tsipras has been vocal in the past over demands for a write-off of Greece's debts and renegotiation of previous agreements. Such demands have been dismissed by European authorities.
They have to pay. Those are the European rules of the game. There is no room for unilateral action in Europe that doesn't exclude a discussion. For example, on the rescheduling of this debt. But I would like to underline that it's not the ECB's money, it's the government's money. It's a discussion between Mr. Tsipras and the European governments.
Many breathed a sigh of relief following a rather muted reaction by European markets to the result, though U.S. stock index futures dipped on Monday.
I think we'll only really see a significant move if we feel that Greece is setting up a domino effect in terms of similar demands from Spain, from Italy, and consequently a big political upheaval, and then perhaps an unraveling of the euro. But there's no sign of that yet.
Another indication of just how volatile a society Greece has become is the fact that the Golden Dawn Party, which has been described as both fascist and neo-Nazi, and many of whose leaders are in prison, is now the third largest in parliament, despite dropping by 1 seat to 17.
They paraded us in front of the television cameras in handcuffs and thought that we would hide our faces. But we stood proudly tall and showed ourselves because we knew that we are in jail, that we are in handcuffs because of our faith in our country, the great ideal of nationalism.
Common wisdom is that the demands and responsibilities accompanying a position of power often make moderates of even the most diehard radicals. What shall remain of election promises will be seen in the coming months.
And with me from Athens now is strategic consultant Stratos Safiolis. I hope I'm saying the name correctly. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So, I want to look at it from the Israeli perspective. I remember 2 years ago there was a party here in Israel, Center Party, that was called Yesh Atid. The Yesh Atid party was led by the current or the last economy or finance minister, former finance minister Yair Lapid. He was like the rock star of the last election. Is it so maybe in this case that Alexis Tsipras is going to be the next rock star, but for a short period of time?
Well, let's just say for a start that Alexis Tsipras is a very charismatic and talented leader. He brought his party from 5% to the current 30-something percent. I think he's a trained engineer. In that sense, he's very practical. I think he's a pragmatist, and He wishes to be in the leadership of his party and of the country for the appropriate amount of time necessary to tackle the difficulties. We will see. We can only see.
What does it mean to be pragmatic in Greece? What does it mean to actually, right now, because the situation of Greece is not so good, and he has a lot to handle right now, especially in the economy, let's say, side. How is he going to try and stand with all the promises that he put to the people?
Well, it's not uncommon for politicians to make a lot of promises, and I think the public is also both realistic and cynical about this. The truth of the matter is that Alexis Tsipras and his party have to decode a rather complicated message, which is, of course, to tackle austerity and a debt that it's not viable, and everybody knows that. And at the same time, comprehend the very strong signal given by the Greek public, which is maintain Greece's position solidly into the Eurozone. I'm not suggesting it's an easy problem. I'm hoping, and actually I'm confident that all parts in this negotiation understand the importance of a positive outcome.
Is it a smart move to just go out right now against the EU and say we can handle the situation by ourselves if they won't take the demands that we're putting on the table?
I think it's a little bit too early to see what is the actual actions that the initiatives that the new Greek government will take. There's always a distance between election rhetoric and the actual initiatives. So I would wait for a few more, couple more days, or once the new government presents in its program in front of the Greek Parliament, then we can answer this question. So I don't expect an all-out confrontation with the guns blazing. I expect a negotiation. Negotiation means people and from different sides having different opinions, but trained to come to reach a conclusion.
Let's talk about the third party, the third biggest party that won, and it's the neo-Nazi party. This party, it seems that is it a surprise? And more than that, just to see from what we're seeing, it was some kind of a scene from a movie, to see a podium just all alone, and somebody is talking from somewhere in prison. Or how is this going to work exactly when all the leaders are actually in jail?
Listen. Let me just tell you something, and I think I represent a very big majority of the Greeks. As a Greek, I'm embarrassed that a neo-Nazi party has managed to accumulate such a percentage. Having said that, its power is declining, and you have to understand that it represents something like 5% of the population eligible for a vote, and it's more of it's a protest vote rather than Nazi beliefs. I think it's as I said, it's embarrassing. It's a big issue. I think it's one of the side effects of the austerity in Greece and in Europe. I think it's not just a Greek problem, but it's a European problem. And I think it's something that the new government and Europe overall needs to tackle, the rise of fascism and neo-Nazism. I expect this to be one of the priorities of the new government.
Yes, definitely. Stratos Sfaiolis, thank you very, very much for being with us.
Israel has a stake in the stability of Greece as a nation and of the Greek government because over the last decade or so, Greece has become a strategic ally for Israel, counterbalancing the hostility of Turkey under Erdogan. The Israeli Navy and Air Force are constantly training with their Greek counterparts. So for Israel, it is very important to see a thriving Greece. And one can take two lessons, at least, from the elections there. One is that when there is normalization in your relations with your neighbors, economy comes to the fore. And right now there is no confrontation between Greece and Turkey, even over Cyprus, so they can concentrate on the economy. The other one is the youthful look of this leader and others. And you could see when the government was passed over from the former generation to this one, that it was a generational change. And this also happens in other places in Europe, mostly Eastern Europe or Central Europe, following the demise of the Soviet Union. And one hopes that eventually it will move a bit east, even to Israel.
How does Germany see this, Mother Germany, that is in control of the situation? It seems that it's starting to a little bit maybe afraid that they're losing control of what is happening right now in Greece?
They're not losing control, they're loosening control. Look, the main discussion was about austerity. This is the crux of the matter. Austerity, or more, let's say, the way the Fed in America does it. And the Germans are for austerity because of their own history, because of their horrible inflations they suffered in the 20th century. So this is the most important issue for them. There's no nationalism, there's no militarism. There is the currency. That's the main issue. That's the main thing. And currency has to remain strong and reliable. So they imposed austerity, which was not wrong. At a certain point, it was indispensable to have austerity because the situation was too loose, and that led Europe to the crisis we know. I mean, it all started with the Americans, but nevertheless the Europeans followed suit because everything was too loose. The question is if austerity is now still necessary, if it's indispensable, or if it's even harming now. And look what happened last week. The president of the central bank, of the Central European Bank, decided to buy bonds, European bonds, for 60 billion euro every month for 1.5 years. So the Germans protest against it. But this is not really what you should believe in. Because if the Germans would have wanted to prevent it, they would have prevented it. So they have the power to prevent such a decision of the central bank, of the European Central Bank, and they didn't. So, first of all, because they understand that austerity has done its time, and there has to be a change in order to stimulate the European economy again. But at the same time, they have a public opinion which is against the loosening of austerity, so they let the European Central Bank do what it does, and in Germany they preach against it, but they don't prevent it. And this will also play a role in the negotiations with Greece.
It's a very delicate balance because Greek democracy is still fragile. One can go back not more than 40 years to remember how it was under the colonels after the right-wing coup with demonstrations in Athens and other places. And Germany doesn't want to push Greece into another chaotic revolutionary position. But again, as Ambassador Primo said, this is a game where the rules have been set. The former Greek government accepted the terms for the help it got. Now the new government wants to renegotiate. It will get something. It won't get everything. And what is also at stake is a larger issue of the international order, the world order, and the continental order. The International Monetary Fund, the European Union, of which Greece is a member. Turkey isn't. Now, if Turkey wants to join the club, is it willing to accept the rules of the game? Or the first time there is a decision which is not to its liking, it will kick it. This is Turkey versus Greece. This is also a lesson for Israel. Israel wants to join NATO in some capacity. Once it is in the club, it will have to adhere to the regulations of the club. So nations have to walk this fine line between independence and sovereignty and getting the benefit of belonging to a larger club.
So let's talk and get back to the point that you said, a lot of scandals, a lot of corruptions, and we're always asking, what is the system that is allowing these scandals and these corruption scandals to happen? We're looking at it here in the, let's say, in Israel, we're looking at it in the, let's say, in the municipalities with the corruptions that we're handling, and we're seeing a lot of mayors going in and out of jail. What is allowing this in Greece? How come this is happening?
Look, I'm not an expert on Greece, but Greece is a split country, a split nation. To begin with, right at the end of the Second World War, there were two nations in Greece, the conservatives and the communists were very, very powerful in Greece. Only with the help of the Allies and particularly the British were the communists in Greece defeated, but they didn't disappear. If you take Tsipras with his party now, his party is composed of various communist fractions, including Maoists and I don't know, all kinds of splinter groups that are even far left from the Communist Party. How this will hold together, I don't know. So once you have a split nation, once you have various counter-interests, contradictory interests, this helps. Then I'm not an expert on Greece, I told you, but I think there's a certain tradition. Corruption is a way of life. You have many countries that cannot get rid of corruption because it's a way of life, a way of tradition, and people don't really see what's so wrong with it. They only want to be on the right side of the scale, that's all. But
well, let's not focus on Greece regarding corruption.
Corruption?
It's a Mediterranean or Levantine tradition of bakshish, of leniency towards officials who get a little extra in order to
cut the way in line.
Yes, bureaucracy is so stifling, and this has to do with the political culture. So one, especially a German, doesn't have to approve of it, but one has to understand that this has gone on for hundreds of years. This is not going to go away under any government.
Emil, don't think that there's no corruption in Germany. Let's not exaggerate. There's a lot of corruption in Germany as well, because in public life, and particularly in democracy.
But what happens in Germany, not only when someone gets a bribe, but also when someone in power is found out to have falsified his academic record? Immediately he is forced to resign, right, because it is not done. Because you may do it until you are caught.
So let's see what not the Israelis. The election will have, let's say, some kind of effect in Europe. Here's what some Europeans had to say about the rise of the left wing. Let's see.
Ich hoffe nur, dass es nicht dazu kommt. I just hope that it won't come to an exit of Greece from the monetary union. That would be bad for Europe, but also the United States and countries in the East.
For Spain it would be positive, and for Europe too, I imagine. Because in Spain things have gone overboard. People are very mistrustful of politicians. There's been too much controversy.
I hope he manages to fix everything. I'm very happy Tsipras won. I just hope Greece gets up again, as well as the whole European Union.
I think the result is negative for Europe, because if Greece eventually exits Europe, there would be serious repercussions for Italy as well. For the Greek people, however, I think it's a good opportunity to change things.
You know, it's amazing. It's in one way or another, the European countries are actually, European civilians are actually looking at what is going to happen with Greece to start and ask themselves, okay, what are we going to do?
Because the identity of each of these people is dual, both Italian nationals or whatever, and European. And they know that what happens in Greece will affect them. And the question is it only a drama or also a drachma, the former Greek coin?
Is it a reason to worry for the rest of the European government that are part of the Eurozone?
I don't think so. I don't think so. There are two reasons why the Europeans want to keep Greece within the Eurozone and in the European Union. Greece became member of the European Union in spite of the fact that it wasn't ripe to become one. And Emil told us before how the Europeans were worried about Greece. So immediately after Karamanlis came back to power with the fall of the colonels, the Europeans wanted to save Greece the cradle of European culture within the family, so they made it part of the European Union, even though they were not ripe for it. Same thing happened with the monetary union. They took Greece inside, even though they knew that Greece was really not ready for it. But now there are two things. One is that they poured a lot of money into Greece. First and foremost, the French and the Germans. Let's not forget the French. They play a main role in this thing, and they poured almost as much money into Greece as did the Germans. They don't want to lose that money. I think that they lose it anyway. So I don't think it's a real problem. But they're, of course, worried about it, particularly the private banks and the insurance companies. The French insurance companies invested a lot in there. Germans too. The second thing is psychological. Look, the European Union is advancing very, very slowly with the greatest difficulties you can imagine. Every once in a while there's a crisis there. But they could always say one thing. Whatever has been achieved in the European Union remains. It's an iron bridge. We never step back from anything we have achieved. L'acquis européen, as it is called in the professional language, this is stable. It's very difficult to reach it, but you never fall back. If Greece leaves or thrown out of the Eurozone or of the European Union, that will be the first time in the history of the European Union that something went backwards, and this is psychologically not good and worries them. But to say that what happens in Greece will happen in Italy or will happen in Spain or will happen in Portugal, there's no comparison whatsoever.
So before we're finishing...
If Greece is evicted, and I agree that no one is going to kick out anybody, but if Greece is evicted, it will help the Eurosceptics in Britain, and they have been strengthened. But all in all, Angela Merkel is a very stern and strict headmistress in this school. And the Greeks are rowdy students, and they rebel against authority. But all in all, they may be grounded or suspended or put on warning. They are not going to be kicked out.
Let's not forget that Greece is less than 2% of the economy of the Eurozone. This is not heavy.
Gentlemen, it seems that some countries are, in one way or another, have more problems than us. And it's always... It's kind of some kind of a relief to know that somebody has bigger problems than us. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for being with me in this part of the show. We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and then we will be back with the rest of the news today with all the updates about Syria and Kobani and the IS. Don't go anywhere. Overall, in Greece, as a new premier is sworn in after winning the vote, the left-wing anti-austerity Syriza party swiftly forms a coalition government, sparking fears that the country could be forced out of the Eurozone. After 4 months of intense fighting, a British-based Syrian NGO announces Kurdish forces have taken the city of Kobani out of the hands of the Islamic State. Over 3,500 flights canceled as the northeast United States braces for a massive winter storm set to hit from central New Jersey to the Canadian border. Welcome back. The battle against the Islamic State extremist jihadist group seems to have taken a step in the right direction today after Kurdish forces reportedly took over a major stronghold, the city of Kobani that stands between Syria and Turkey. I-24 News reporter Rusha Pur has more.
It took months of intense fighting, but Kobani is no longer under Islamic State control. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Kurdish rebels from the YPG group have taken full control of the embattled city, separating Syria and Turkey. If the reports are correct, this is a huge defeat for the extremist jihadist group, which has now lost a major strategic point.
Our war is against the terrorists of Islamic State. The world should support Kobani, the Peshmerga, and the soldiers of the Kurdish guerrilla, YPG and YPJ.
Kobani was the focus of the coalition airstrikes ever since it launched its campaign last September in order to assist the Kurds and other opposition groups in their battle against the IS. Last week, the YPG scored another achievement when they broke a key IS supply line between Mosul in northern Iraq and strongholds to the west near Syria.
Peshmerga forces are now combing the area for remaining members of IS, who are left with only two options, either to be killed or to flee. They cannot stay in the area.
The Islamic State still controls vast territories in Syria and Iraq, including Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, and the northwestern Syrian city of Raqqa, known for its oil facilities. Nonetheless, the Kurds have perhaps closed a significant chapter in the battle for Iraq and Syria. But at the same time, they have perhaps opened a new deadly chapter in the region.
And joining me right now is Natalie Carney from Diyarbakir, southeast of the Syrian-Turkish border. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Natalie, let's try to understand. Turkey just opened a refugee camp for 35,000 refugees from Kobani. What is the Turkish policy now on the border with Syria?
Well, I think the Turkish policy remains the same. The freeing of Kobani from the ISIL hands is relatively brand new news. In fact, here on the streets of Diyarbakir, which is seen as the heartland of the Kurdish Turks, there's been celebrations across the streets for the last hour or so. So the news is just very fresh. So I don't think there's any change to the Turkish policy as of yet. But the timing is quite interesting. As you've mentioned, they've just opened a brand new refugee camp, 35,000 people from Kobani. But now with Kobani being freed, many of these people have just been dying to go back home. So we're quite likely to see a surge of people, rushing back into Syria, leaving these refugee camps and trying to go home.
Natalie, can they go back home?
Well, a lot of people are certainly hoping so. I'm sure it's going to be a logistical nightmare for Turkey at this time, especially when Turkey is really, really trying to monitor who is crossing the border. Of course, Turkey has been criticized quite substantially by the international community for being what they're calling, quote-unquote, a jihadi highway. So Turkey is monitoring the ins and outs of people crossing the border as best they can. So it is going to be a logistical nightmare as all these people try to race back to their homes in Kobani to try to salvage what they can.
So, we're talking about 35,000 refugees. How does Turkey going to handle this situation?
Well, 35,000 people is what this new refugee camp can accommodate for. The situation in Kobani that's been going on the last 4 or 5 months has seen a surge of Syrian refugees into Turkey, upwards of 250,000 people. So there is a substantial number of people from Kobani. This camp alone can only maintain 35,000 of them. The rest of them are living with other family members, are living on the streets, are doing as best they can to get by. And again, those create very, very difficult times for these people. So again, another reason why they want to get back home as soon as they can.
Yes, Natalie Carney, thank you very, very much for this phone call with us. We're moving to Syria. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad made some strong statements in an interview to Foreign Affairs magazine released today after a long absence from the international media. Addressing the conflict, Assad said U.S. ground troops would be illegal, but a potential cooperation with airstrikes against the IS is possible. Ayman Siksik has the highlights.
A new round of peace talks in Moscow begins Monday, marked by a sense of reservation from world leaders, including the U.S. But as discussions are launched again to bring the 4-year-long civil war in Syria to an end, it seems no one is as cautious about expressing hope as the Syrian leader himself.
What is going on in Moscow is no negotiations about the solution. It's only preparations for the conference.
This was the answer Bashar al-Assad gave when asked if the Moscow talks could succeed. In an interview with Foreign Policy Monday, al-Assad offered insights that may be surprising to many, one of which is a potential cooperation with the U.S. air campaign.
Yes, the potential is definitely always there, because we've been talking about or asking for international cooperation against terrorism for 30 years. But this potential needs will. The question that we have is, how much will does the United States have to really fight terrorism on the ground?
And who does the Syrian president hold responsible for supporting the rebels? The answer lies in last week's attack in Quneitra, for which he accuses Israel.
They are supporting the rebels in Syria. It's very clear, because whenever we made advance in some place, they make an attack in order to undermine the army.
For Bashar al-Assad, it's no surprise Syria is at the heart of the peace talks, despite two similar failed attempts in Geneva in the past.
Syria is the heart of the Middle East. Everybody knows that. If the Middle East is sick, the whole world will be unstable.
Talks in Moscow will continue until January 29th to determine the extent to which the Middle East is quote-unquote sick and under elusive hopes of discerning a cure.
And with me from Stockholm, Sweden, is member of the Syrian opposition, Dr. Kemal Al-Abwani. Good evening. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening.
So, Dr. Al-Abwani, let's try to understand, do you feel actually that any agreement could be reached in Moscow?
No, absolutely not.
Why
because,
not?
Who is going to Moscow is not represent anything inside Syria. They are not opposition. They are businessmen and they are agents to KGB, and they invite them to stall the representation of the Syria. Nobody have anything on the land, so any agreement will not give us anything. Yeah.
So, with this chaotic situation that is happening right now in Syria, with IS and rebel forces and the Syrian forces from the army and the government, who is the opposition?
The Syrian people now in refugee and under siege, so the 20 million Syrian people now out of the political life, out of representation, they are the real opposition. Nobody find a third option. None the criminal regime, none the terrorism. So this third option is the opposition, which now is going to be nothing, because nobody listen to him, nobody help him, nobody think about him. Everybody give us to change between Daesh or between Bashar al-Assad, which means we have to choose between a criminal and the criminal. This is not fair. Without justice, we cannot reestablish Syria. Without justice, we cannot reestablish Syria with the criminal regime killed.
Dr. Al-Bawani, what is the problem with what you're telling me? Because it seems that there is no leadership for the opposition. It seems that there is no leadership for the people who are refugees, for the people who are killed, for the people who are for the 200,000 people that have been murdered and massacred in Syria. Who is actually leading these people?
Yeah, because when we use the fake representation, when we use who is agent to the security outside, we will not find any leadership inside Syria. So this is the problem. Nobody gives the people of Syria a chance to build his political councils and institution. Qatar and Saudi and Turkey and everybody try to stall this councils to take the resolution of Syrian people. That's why you cannot find now any institution leading the opposition. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Al-Abawani, thank you very, very much for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And U.S. President Barack Obama made history today, becoming the first American president to attend the Republic Day Parade of India. Obama marked a fruitful visit to the Indian subcontinent with a series of agreements towards his next stop, Saudi Arabia.
And Prab Simran Singh is leading.
India is celebrating its 66th Republic Day with a special guest and plenty of expectations about the nation's future. Even the rainfall in Delhi Monday could not destroy the high spirits and the historic moment. For the first time in the subcontinent's history, an American president was in attendance at the Republic Day Parade. US President Barack Obama, who arrived in India Sunday, attended a marathon of ceremonies and events and also signed a series of bilateral agreements with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, including a key nuclear deal.
Today we achieved a breakthrough understanding on two issues that were holding up our ability to advance our civil nuclear cooperation, and we're committed to moving towards full implementation. And this is an important step that shows how we can work together to elevate our relationship.
However, this agreement was welcomed with mild suspicion by India's neighbor China. Beijing said that Indian attempts to join the nuclear supply group needs to be considered carefully.
We support the group carrying out discussions on admitting new members, and at the same time, we encourage India to take the next steps to satisfy the relevant standards of the group.
Obama's visit marks a new chapter in the relations between the two countries, years after India's Modi was considered a persona non grata in the US for his involvement in a Gujarat disaster in the early 2000s, an incident that cost the lives of around 1,000 people. But that's all history now, as Obama walked the glorious parade, receiving an honor saved only for Maharajas.
Yes, and with me from Chennai, India, is R.K. Krishna, editor of Frontline India. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening.
So, Mr. Krishna, let's try to understand why people are so worried and why the other countries are so worried from this, let's say, good relationship between India and the United States.
That is basically because what has happened, the Obama-Modi meeting gives a glimpse into what guides Narendra Modi's foreign policy. We have seen that the two have spelled out a strategic dialogue, which even spoke about the South China Sea, which is a particular worry to the Chinese. Now, the Chinese would have thought that once Narendra Modi came to office, because he was denied a visa to go to the United States, he would be moving away from the United States into the arms of China, and it would have a better relationship with India. Unfortunately for China, what has happened is the India-US relationship is not just grown stronger, but the two countries have also become closer. And in its view, any such relationship will be only to its great discomfort. It's also to be remembered that this is the first time that a U.S. president is being the chief guest at Delhi's Republic Day parade.
So, if we want to put the emphasis on Pakistan, how does Pakistan see this visit?
It is also to Pakistan's discomfort that this whole thing has happened. I emphasize China because I think the relationship between India and China had shown signs of improvement compared to the Manmohan Singh regime. Now, Pakistan will always be one of the closest allies of the United States because it is going to be the frontline state on the war on terror. So regardless of however close U.S. may come to India, we have to remember that the war on terror is still being fought in Afghanistan. I don't see despite pullout of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, there are at least 10,000 people who will always remain there. And Iran being a neighbor to, I think Pakistan will always be on the front line, despite the voices that we hear go to the contrary.
Yes.
You're going to have Pakistan will always be important in the in South Asia to the U.S.
Yes, Mr. R.K. Krishna, thank you very, very much for this conversation. The crisis in Yemen continues. The country's powerful Shiite militia has blocked access to the university in Sana'a, known as a center of opposition. Those opponents have urged more demonstrations while the country remains in a power vacuum. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama has vowed not to let up in the drone campaign against jihadists there. The most recent strike today killed 3 suspected al-Qaeda members. And with me right now in the studio is senior Middle East analyst Ali Waqid. Good evening.
Good
Thank you very much for coming. So who controls right now Yemen?
Well, if we, to be honest, nobody can tell you who is exactly controlling where
and when, but in general, I think that there is a dramatic evolution in Yemen in the last days and weeks, and as today was another big. The fact that a militia that has no official role in the state is controlling the life in Yemen, both the security on the field and both the political issue in sieging the president or the ex-president or the resigning president, and in fixing and deciding and dictating the order of the day for the Yemenites. And Lucy, I talked with some Yemenite colleagues today, and they said that the equation is very clear: to choose between the bad and the worst, to choose between dividing Yemen into a couple of states and between a civil war. And unfortunately, this appears to be the choice of the Yemenites in the very next future.
Ali, explain to me, with right now, let's say Al-Qaeda is seeing what is happening with IS, and seeing that IS is being in one way or another stopped and maybe blocked, if we can say this word. Is it affecting maybe these terror groups in other countries not to continue what they're doing?
It is affecting, and it is affecting in the attitude of the international community and the urgency that the international community for the moment is not seeing, in spite of the fact that there is a meeting of the Security Council to discuss the Yemenite situation, but because of the fact that the Houthi that are destabilizing the situation as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, are on the other hand fighting Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula, Al-Qaeda that carried out the last attacks in Paris, and are targeting Yemenites and foreigners in Yemen. So this is the situation that the international community need to deal with. On one hand, the Houthis that are putting in danger the stability of the region, especially of the allies of the United States, Saudi Arabia, and the other states, and on the other hand, this is the same militia that is fighting Al-Qaeda in the region, and mainly in Yemen. And by the way, Lucy, I'm hearing voices from the new regime in Saudi Arabia that is calling to revise, to rediscuss the relations between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis, and not to consider the Houthis as the ultimate enemy or the ultimate satellite of Iran, but maybe to try to open some dialogue with the Houthis in order to understand whether there might be a coexistence between the Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia and the Zaydism, Islamic Shiite of Houthis.
You know, from what you're just saying, it seems even more complicated than the situation in Syria.
Unfortunately.
Yes. Ali Waqid, thank you very, very much for this. Major airlines in the U.S. have preemptively canceled over 3,500 flights to and from the northeast on Monday and Tuesday, expecting chaos from a massive storm heading to the region. More on the blizzard prep in the next report from ABC News.
It's the Northeast versus the Nor'easter.
Prepare for something worse than we have seen before.
50 million people are braced to take a bruising from the massive blizzard barging towards the East Coast. Forecasters expect conditions will be dire.
Whatever normal safety precautions you take in advance of a storm, take even more.
Be careful. Icy weather over the weekend has already knocked many off their feet in the region. By Monday night, they'll be measuring snow piles in feet. Snowblowers are facing blowouts. Along the Massachusetts coast, they're gearing up and boarding up, facing gusts up to 65 miles an hour.
It's the wind that we're really most concerned with.
And shoppers crowding stores, racing the weather to stock up on provisions.
Just trying to get in the parking lot here was insane.
Picking up a shovel, and absolutely in prep for the storm.
Mountains of salt are being moved to fight mountains of snow. Expect serious air travel disruptions. Already more than 200 flights affected today at Chicago O'Hare alone, 91 canceled, 348 delayed.
We are preparing to not leave the house for a few days.
Experts say that's the best storm preparation of all.
And with this called, now to sports. Okay, and with me is the host host of the I-24 News Sports Magazine, Jonathan Regev.
Hi.
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 All good?
All fine. Yourself? Happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you every single night.
Everyone's happy.
Oh, yes. If we are all happy, Australian Open, are they happy too?
The top seeds are because they went through. We had some surprises along the way. In previous day, Roger Federer, for example, went out. But today, no problem. Serena Williams, she's through to the quarterfinals. She beat Sabine Muguruza from Spain. It was a big deal for her because these two met in the French Open. And back then, it was a Spaniard who won. She gave quite a hard time to Serena today as well. She took the first set 6-2, but then the world number one, she recovered her game, winning 6-3, 6-2. Serena Williams, there we see her at match point, winning the match, and she is through to the quarterfinal. She's among the top 8. She won only the US Open last year, so she definitely wants to do it here again at the Australian Open also. Okay. And we turn to the men's tournament. Novak Djokovic, world number one, no problems for him. He beat Gilles Muller from Luxembourg 6-4. 7-5 and 7-5. He's through to the quarterfinals. The quarterfinals were the place where he was stopped last year by Stan Wawrinka.
Nice.
And we'll see what he does now.
No surprises, actually.
No major surprises.
Okay. I won't say boring, but okay.
Yeah, I know we like surprises. I know you're right. You're absolutely right.
Let's talk about something interesting, not politics, but sports concerning Cuba and the United States.
Yes. The relations between Cuba and the United States are finally, after 55 years of U.S. embargo, getting better, and it transcends on sports also. For the first time, American athletes went to Havana to compete in the Havana Triathlon. This is something very nice. And you know what? After 55 years, you know what happened? The American anthem was played in the Cuban capital. It's nice, optimistic story. Yes, we see them here.
Optimistic.
We see them training here. American athletes in Cuba, something we have not seen since 1960. Finally.
You know what I was thinking about?
What were you thinking, Lucy?
I was thinking if Cuban cigars will be legal.
Of course they will. I mean, yeah, or else what will Seinfeld talk about?
Yes, definitely.
Beautiful episodes with Kramer about that. Yes.
So let's go to Speed, Ice, and Beautiful and Scary all together.
Yes, I love that. It's called the Crashed Ice Season. It's the first race of the season. It was in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's just beautiful. Those people, they just race on the ice. It always looks fast and nice and colorful. I love it. The winner, and here we see, look, there's a beautiful cathedral in the back. And the winner, he was Canadian. He wins all of these events. It's just beautiful. And Sean Croxwell is his name. And they just race. You know, it's fast. It's colorful. And there were 100,000 spectators along the way. You gotta love that. It's beautiful. I love it.
Okay, so let's go out and have
in the Middle Eastern weather, of course, which does absolutely that. We can do that right outside here. No 20 degrees outside. Yes.
Yeah, just like on.
Fall on our you-know-what.
No. Okay, Jonathan Regev, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy. Always a pleasure.
Ice away. Yes, and to something maybe funny, maybe not, the Israeli elections. The Israeli communities located near the Gaza Strip may not represent a large voting electorate, but concerns of residents there have become central to the Israeli political conversation. I-24 News correspondent Shai Ben-Ari spoke with a number of these residents to get a sense of where they are leaning in the coming elections.
With elections less than 2 months away, Israeli citizens still have some time to contemplate just how they will vote. But the choices of those living along Israel's border with the Gaza Strip are perhaps a bit more complex than others. For years, the communities here have been living under heavy rocket and mortar fire, with last summer's conflict just the latest in a long chain. Many of these communities are kibbutzim, traditionally identified with the left in general and the Labor Party in particular. Despite the security concerns that are prevalent here, much of that tradition remains intact.
We suffer from the fact that most resources are funneled not to the Negev and the Galilee regions, but to Judea and Samaria and the settlements. I have no dilemmas whatsoever. I do not want Netanyahu to continue as prime minister. I would join the cry, anyone but Bibi.
A mortar fell about 3 meters away from my house,
and it completely sprayed the wall.
Adele voted for Yair Lapid's centrist Yesh Atid party in the last elections, but remains undecided so far.
I wouldn't like to see him disappear completely, but I'm really debating whether giving my voice to one of the smaller parties is not sort of throwing it out. We have to have a government that has on its agenda the good of the people here, as well as the good of the people in Gaza, because until they have something to live for, they're only going to have something to die for.
But there is no denying many here have moved to the right following years of violence in the area. Uriel, for example, is trying to decide between Labor and the right-wing Jewish Home Party. Do you think that is something that is a result of the specific situation here?
Yes, of course, because since I don't believe my neighbors from the other side anymore that they want to live as neighbors to me, then I don't have any love feeling for them.
Adva is a member of Kibbutz Kfar Azah and a supporter of the far-right Otzma Yisrael party.
I've seen a shift with some people that used to be left or even extreme left and are now leaning toward center to right.
But even among right-wing voters, there seems to be little support for the current incumbent of the Prime Minister's office.
Maybe he does his best, I don't know. I see him bending down a lot to Obama, to the Obama administration.
I think I want to replace Bibi because I don't think these elections should have come right now. It's a waste of money.
Israelis living in the communities in this area needn't look far to be reminded of the surrounding threats. What's certain is, whoever wins the next elections will have their work cut out for them to solve the long-standing problems that exist here. Shai Ben Ari, I-24 News, the Israel-Gaza border.
Yes, and we're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and then we will be back for the daily debate, Elections 2015. Don't go anywhere, 2 minutes, and I'll be back.